y'all, and welcome back to Carbon Scoring, the best place for comics, history, and action figures. I've been a G.I. Joe fan since I was a kid in the 80s. It really is the perfect toy line, a mixture of realistic military action, science fiction, and ninjas. With 3 3/4 inch super articulated action figures that interact with some of the coolest vehicles ever. And it's all tied together with a backstory so good that it's still going strong more than 40 years later. The spirit of the original line now runs through the G.I. Joe Classified series of 6-inch figures. The team at Hasbro have hit on the right mix of enthusiasm, storytelling, and good old-fashioned nostalgia. And they're producing the best toy line out there. There was so much product released from Classified this past year, we're just going to start at the beginning and take a look at what's been produced, what's coming out, and what we are looking forward to seeing. We've made pretty good headway with the 13 original Joes from 1982, as we're almost halfway there, and number 7 is coming, as Clutch will be released with the Vamp. Plus, a new retro-carded Scarlet is up for pre-order as well. And while we've got numerous versions of Snake Eyes in the line, this retro-carded version is the definitive 82 Snake Eyes for me. I was even able to use this figure to recreate the cover of perhaps the greatest comic ever, G.I. Joe 21, The Silent Issue. Let's take a closer look at one of this year's offerings, Heavy Machine Gunner, Rock and Roll.
As we mentioned, Rock and Roll was one of the original 13 Joes, and those first 13 really reused only just a few basic parts. I mean, like, let's take my favorite Joe, Clutch. He had Steeler's chest, Rock and Roll's arms, Rock and Roll's head. But for this, we've taken that kind of idea of the generic soldier and really given it much more personality. Now, there's a lot of callbacks to the classic Rock and Roll, particularly the bandoliers of bullets running across his chest. That's exactly what the original figure looked like. And of course, he comes with his heavy machine gun, which really looks like just a scaled up version of the one from the original 3 3/4 inch line. Now, all of those original 13 Joes had these sweet matching helmets. Now, Rock and Roll here has one. It's similar to the one that Breaker has and the one that Grunt has, but it is different. It's got increased paint apps and it's got the Hang 10 written on there. And that's where the theming of Rock and Roll, his nickname, really plays through this entire figure. You can see that he's got these kind of rocking sort of tattoos everywhere, like all on his arm. You know, Rock and Roll, the character was meant to be like a surfer guy from California, which is part of where the Hang 10 comes in. It's part of where, the horns come from. I love that face. Look at how great that bearded sculpt is. And when I initially saw the figure, I was like, I don't know that I like, I want them green. I want these guys to look green. But this little bit of lighter color actually just really makes him stand out on a shelf and creates a unique figure that still calls back to the original, but is something all its own.
The ranks of Cobra started in 1982 with the Cobra Trooper and Cobra Officer. But for 5 flag points, you could mail away for Cobra Commander. In a continued nod to the history of the line, the Hasbro team released this Cobra Commander with the Hiss Tank, featuring the infamous Mickey Mouse Cobra logo on his chest, a variant that only the very first mail-away releases had. But the figure I want to see next from the 82 series is Laser Trooper Flash, and we've gotten hints, as the repaint Glinda that comes with the HasLab Dragonfly may be more of a repaint it forward, as her included weapon looks a lot like Flash's laser rifle. While the 82 Joes focused on traditional military soldiers, 1983 saw the expansion of personalities and unique sculpts to the line. 6 more Joes have joined the series, with Doc, Airborne, Wild Bill, and a retro-carded Duke on the way. I love this year's Torpedo and Tripwire, but we gotta take a closer look at the best of them all, Snow Job.
I'm going to make a real effort not to say this 400 times, but Snow Job was one of my favorite G.I. Joes as a kid. And one of the big reasons was because he was able to carry all of his stuff on him. The original figure had a backpack that allowed the ski poles to snap into place, much like these do, but it also had little peg holes so that his skis could snap in as well. And the spirit of that has carried forward with this new snow job figure. Now, he is so freaking sweet. These skis are great, and they plug right into the footholes, the pegs on the bottom of his feet. He comes with multiple heads, but I've decided to go with the one that's kind of the classic look, the one from the original figure with the hood up. But I love those like polarized goggles. Of course, he has this sweet, almost sniper like rifle. And the original Sojab figure actually had that first laser cannon that we saw throughout all of the cartoons. But it's the fact that all of this stuff fits on his backpack, that you can clip in his snowshoes, that you can clip in his ski poles, that you can drop his sniper rifle right down the middle. It just makes for such a complete package. And for one of the Joe team's most unique members, somebody who, doesn't really fit in with anything else, I love the fact that he's just like a completely self-contained figure. This is why it's absolutely one of my top figures of the year.
The ranks of Cobra expanded in 1983 as well, with Destro, Major Blood, and the Hiss Tank Driver. But the 83 Joe that I want to see is Ace. It might be too much to dream for even a HasLab to do a Sky Striker, but I still want to see the Joe team's top pilot in 6-inch form. The 84 Joes are a little slim with only Roadblock and the phenomenal Spirit Iron Knife thus far, with Mutt, Rakondo, and a Night Force Ripcord confirmed on the way. My choice for our next needed figure is Blowtorch, the Joe's resident flamethrower. Now, 1984 was all about Cobra. Just look at this collection of characters bent on world domination. What a year for the bad guys, where each of these versions on display were released this past year. These are so good, but we gotta focus on two of them, starting with
Firefly. This is one where I have to give credit to the Joe team because they took something that was good and then turned around and made it perfect. This is actually the second version of Firefly that we've gotten. The first one came out earlier in the line, and it was clearly a Firefly figure. I mean, he had the gray camo pattern, he had kind of the crazy face, but he also had this huge tactical vest that really limited his articulation. And while he had some really cool features, like he had like a flying drone that attached to the top of his backpack, it was one where they were really kind of going with the original kind of super high-tech storyline and went more with that more so than the classic look of the character. So again, the reason why I give them credit is because they recognized, no, this is a big one. This is one that we've got to do perfect. And they came back and gave us a second version. And this is the Cobra Saboteur that we all wanted. Again, because of losing that huge vest, you get much more articulation. But they kept some of the newer tech features, like the fact that he does come with this drone device, which again snaps right into the backpack. The backpack is actually very reminiscent of his original 80s backpack, as is this gun. It looks exactly like the one that he had back then. But he comes with his like tech device, and of course, it's that great gray camo pattern with the face mask that just makes him one of the most badass dudes that Cobra has in their ranks. I love this Firefly figure. I could repeat almost the exact same story for the retro-carded Storm Shadow. So this is actually, I guess, the third release of Storm Shadow in the line. There was the crazy like winter one that I hated so much I didn't even pick up. But then we did get a classic Storm Shadow in the regular line, and it was great. I mean, it would have sufficed for me as the Storm Shadow. But then this one, there's just some small differences, some differences with his forearms, just a little bit of differences with his costume that make him much more accurate to the original figure. But he comes with all of those same accessories. He has his two blades that fit nicely here. I love the fact that there's an extra arrow that slides out that you can fit right into his quiver, and then that fits right on this hand so that you can have him shooting an arrow, because as much as Storm Shadow is the consummate ninja, his greatest skill was with his bow. And so I'm glad that they kept that front and center with this figure. This is the guy that I want to have standing right alongside my Snake Eyes as the ultimate brothers.
If you can't tell, I am all in on this line, and this is the most figures I have showcased in a single video. Let me know what you think, and give the video a like and a share. And subscribe to Carbon Scoring for the best in comics history and action figures every week. But when it comes to the 85 Joes, huh, now we are talking about a full lineup with some of the most beloved figures from the G.I. Joe animated series. The 1985 Joes are a true highlight of the line. Let's start by taking a closer look at Shipwreck.
Shipwreck was a character that I was familiar with from both the G.I. Joe comic and the G.I. Joe cartoon. Now, those two different versions of the Joe team took very, very different approaches to the characters. The cartoon was a little bit more slapsticky. Certainly, Shipwreck was he was used a lot of time as comic relief with his parrot Polly, whereas in the comics, he was a much more straightforward, naval character. I think that this actually kind of hits the best of both worlds. He has that look that we're all familiar with from the cartoon, but it takes it and puts it into a more of a real world context. And there's just so much detail here, from like his chest hair to his naval tattoos to some of the accessories that he comes with. Now, I love the braided rope and the fact that Polly sits right on top of it, but even to this sidearm that basically looks like something that a pirate would use is so cool. And he has the anchor that like hooks right onto his belt. Again, you can get all of his accessories right there with him on the figure. This is a solid, solid version of kind of a character that could be taken in any direction, but I really like the way that they played up the best of both animation and the comics with this figure.
The 85 Cobras were no slouches either, with the first of Zartan's dreadnoughts making an appearance. But this assortment is all about the army builders. Starting with Cobra Commander's elite troopers, the Crimson Guard. We got a slew of options with the Televipers, which came with the Cobra Trouble Bubble and 3 different head sculpts to allow for varied looks for each of the different troopers. One of this year's most popular figures, the fantastic Snow Serpents. So cool that they can be snowboarding, snowshoeing, or sneaking up in wolves' clothing. And of course, my favorite figure of the year, the Cobra Eels. These guys are just so fantastic. Let's take a closer look.
I really feel like everything in the G.I. Joe classified line just came together with this Cobra Eel figure. I mean, one, it's kind of an absurd sci-fi type of thing, which is exactly perfect for Cobra. But the design just looks so good. The way that red, silver, and black all plays together. I love the eel logo on his propulsion unit here. So he has like an air tank slash propulsion unit, but he still has the classic flippers. And those actually came with the original figure as well. Plus this harpoon gun with the gold painted tip and the little red, rope that goes around his wrist really works well. The mask is so good with the plastic, the clear plastic, so you can see the face sculpt underneath, and the fact that these air tubes tie in so perfectly. I really wish that the torpedo figure had had clear lenses on his mask. That would have made that figure even better. But hey, this is why occasionally the bad guys have the upper hand, and that is certainly going to be the case when it comes to Cobra Eels.
But as awesome as all these 85 Joes are, we still need a good old-fashioned infantry trooper in the form of Footloose. 1986 may not have had as many additions, but we got some serious heavy hitters with General Hawk and Lowlight.
Hawk actually appeared in the original line as one of the original 13 Joes. He was perhaps the most plain character that you could possibly get. He came packaged with the mobile missile system, and it seemed like such a strange thing to have the leader of your Joe team as almost an afterthought in the action figure line. Well, they fixed that with the second release, the General Hawk figure, and man, this one really captures all of that style. I love the leather bombardier sort of jacket, with this great collar here. He has all of his awards and, of course, the Clayton Abernathy name. He's got his sidearms right here. I actually took the pointed finger from the His Tank Cobra Commander figure and put it on this one. I think that just really works well. He does have his helmet, but one of the things that I like is when you take it off, his hair, he's got that little wisp of gray, which just gives the character just that much more gravitas. I mean, he appears to be just a little bit older. He's even got like sculpted wrinkles into his brow, which is just a touch of detail that makes this guy look like somebody who could be commanding the special forces team. And I don't know. I didn't have the original Hawk figure. I had the original Hawk figure. I had the original 13 Hawk figure. I didn't have this second version as a kid, but man, I love this and I am so glad to have him leading my Joes. This is another figure that I didn't have as a kid, Low Light. And I don't know that I would have been, that attracted to him as a kid because he's kind of plain. I mean, he's just really sort of gray. He doesn't look like to me one of those traditional military guys that I really loved as a kid. But now that I know more about this character, oh, I think it's just absolutely awesome. Of course, he's a sniper. And so being incognito, being in the gray with just his like turban with just his beanie up here really makes a lot of sense. But this is one where the storytelling that Lenny talks about really comes through because when you take his goggles off, you can see he has like bags under his eyes. And the thought is that he has to get in position and like stay there for hours and hours at a time, waiting to take his shot. And of course, to get into that position, he comes with his sniper rifle, which is so coolly designed to be held in this case. Look at this long, beautiful rifle that he has in there. And then all of the different accessories, the tripod, the scope, the silencer, and all of it just fits perfectly right in here. And he can actually have this strapped to his back as well. He doesn't necessarily have to be carrying it. But this is a character that I wasn't that aware of, but now I think has been done so much more justice in the classified line.
Things got pretty crazy on the Cobra side, as Serpentor, Dr. Mindbender, and Zorana joined the fray. But it was the legions of android bats, or battle android troopers, that caused the most damage. They were backed up by Cobra Vipers, so elite that I still don't have a classic one, because it was a Target exclusive all the way back at the beginning of the line. Long-term channel viewers know that I attended Clemson University, and you know who else did? That's right, the fridge. So you know that's who I'm going to say we're missing from the 86 lineup. 1987 felt like the last year of the classic G.I. Joe A Real American Hero line. Things got kind of crazy after this, but all four of these figures are absolute bangers.
For me, I think the thing that I love about Outback is the attitude. Just look at that face. Look at how grizzled that guy looks. I love the way that his hair kind of falls over the top of the headband. And I really liked the Tiger Force version of this. I thought that the orange shirt with the huge tiger on the chest was pretty good. But this classic with just the survival t-shirt it's just spectacular. The fact that, he has the shovel, he has his torch, he's got his sidearm. This is a great gun with the strap that he has right here. This is a dude that truly does look like he can take care of himself. They went with the more buff body for him, which really fits the whole thing. I don't know. This is a guy who, again, it wasn't a character that I knew that well. He didn't feature that prominently in the comics, other than the one storyline where he and Stalker, and I can't remember who else were trapped and he had to escape. But again, that's where that one man survival crew really makes sense. And I think it all comes through with this figure. One of the coolest things about Tunnel Rat is that his face is designed off of G.I. Joe creator Larry Hama. Larry is still the writer of the G.I. Joe comics. We're on issue 302, should come out here pretty soon. It's been going strong for 40 years, and he is the man who has really built the mythology of this entire line, and I'm so glad that he's still getting to write the comics. But the Tunnel Rat is a character that really is kind of a Vietnam War era character when U.S. troops were having to fight through the tunnels that the Viet Cong built to hide and to live. And this is so cool. Look, the little rat with the flashlight logo that he has. He also, oh, I don't have his backpack with him. His backpack has both of his torches, and of course, he's got this huge gun. This is a great figure. It's one that I just truly love, mainly because of the historical ties that it has to Larry Hama and the comic series.
And truly one of the surprises of the line for me was just how awesome this Chuckles figure turned out to be.
There were a few other characters that didn't fit neatly into those first 5 years of the A Real American Hero line that I wanted to touch on because they made such cool figures this year, beginning with Shockwave. So this is a cool like SWAT trooper. He's got this great shield with the LED lights. You can see where he's taking out some cobras. I like the way his hat works. And while I wouldn't have been attracted to this like blue with the yellow kind of technical camo as a kid, on a 6-inch figure, it works. I think it's something that just didn't translate well to 3 3/4 inches, but works really, really well at 6 inches. I wasn't familiar with Wolf Spider as a character, but this Night Force version with the drop down goggles and that sweet helmet and this giant rifle, plus he comes with a rope and like a radio pack. This is like everything that I want G.I. Joe figures to be. I don't have to know anything about this guy to know that this is a super cool figure. You combine that with the sweet wolf spider logo on his shoulder. Yeah, man, that totally works. More of an inside joke, the shooter character actually is a reference back to the very first issue of G.I. Joe, where they kind of made a sort of joke about editor in chief Jim Shooter and had like a covered up head in the comic. She later actually did become an actual action figure in I think the 40th anniversary line and then now or in the 30th anniversary line and now here she is in 6-inch form with her giant sniper rifle. Very cool. And then two of the most grotesque Cobra figures from this year, the Range Viper with that death skull and exposed brain that's like plugged into his backpack that's just like stocked up with all these weapons. I can't imagine coming across this guy on the battlefield. And certainly the most grotesque of all is the mole rat figure. Now, I got to do a little bit more reading to understand exactly what the backstory behind this nightmare is. But when you come up with a sculpt that grotesque and awesome, I got to include it in the year's top list.
But there is no way we can talk about G.I. Joe Classified being the line of the year without taking a look at maybe the single greatest toy of the year, the Hiss Tank. If it was not already obvious, I'm kind of crazy for this line and have heavily invested in army building, so of course I got two Hiss Tanks. For this one, I decided to go with the classic 80s look, the clear canopy, the more simple tread covers, and, well, that's pretty much it. I love the clean, but still futuristic sci-fi look of the original Hiss. I mean, there was really no way to improve on the original, right? Well, just take a look at this monster. With my second Hiss, I've added all the bells and whistles. And by bells and whistles, I mean missile launchers, machine guns, and frontal cannons. I've turned on all the lights for this one as well, so you can appreciate just how cool this thing looks all lit up. I normally don't care about electronic features, but in this case, they are truly additive to the total look. If this is where we're starting with vehicles for this line, I can't wait to see where we're going. I think I showed over 100 different figures in this video, and it took me hours to put these things into positions and pose them and take shots, but I love it, and I hope that you love it too. And if this is the kind of thing you like, please let me know in the comments. And as always, for the best in comics history and action figures, subscribe to Carbon Scoring.